Hello and welcome to this edition of Wineskins. I'm Father Jim Korda. Wineskins is a program that features reflections on the lives of the saints and the sacred scriptures, along with a variety of issues and topics, all from a Catholic perspective. Wineskins is brought to you through the annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts, a division of the Society of St. Paul. On our program today, I will interview Kitty Sherer and Jim Knight on human trafficking. We will also hear more information on the life and times of Saint Cecilia, and today, as the Church celebrates the 33rd Sunday in Ordinary Time, we will get a deeper insight into those particular Sunday readings. That and more on Wineskins. In our current issue segment, I will speak with Sister Mary McCormick on the annual Religious Retirement Appeal. With me now is Sister Mary McCormick, who is the General Superior of the Ursuline Sisters of Youngstown. Welcome to Wineskins.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
This is the time again for the annual Religious Retirement Appeal. I think what I'd like to ask you first is, why do we use that word appeal instead of collection?
Well, one of the reasons is that it is something that is ongoing. It's not just an emergency second collection that sometimes happens in a parish. This is an appeal sponsored by the U.S. Catholic bishops on behalf of all religious in the United States to really make up for what they call a past service liability. And all the communities in the United States have need of some past service liability. Sisters were paid relatively little most of the days of their ministry, plus there was no money for retirement. So this is to try and make up for that gap between what they might have gotten in retirement and the needs that they have now.
Well, in this almost 30 years of the appeal, we've hopefully seen a difference in many of the religious communities in our country and hopefully here within our diocese. What would be some of the things that really helped particular communities in the diocese? And then after you talk about that, let's talk specifically about the Ursulines.
You're right, it has made a significant difference. It was not until the early 1980s that communities began to recognize. There were some studies done, and not only in the church, but even among other people who follow finance. There were studies done about what a huge liability this was going to be moving forward. So there was a sense of, together as a church, we need to do something about it. And so it has made a huge difference. It was a way for communities to begin to put some money aside for retirement. In the beginning, often this was the beginning of having a pool of money that they could use. And, the rising cost of health care, you know that there are things that every person needs that in another day we might not have thought of, but today we do. Wheelchairs, walkers, all kinds of aids to help people be mobile and independent for a lot longer. In particular, in our community, it really has helped us each year, and we're a small community, so we get a modest grant. This past year, our grant was about $42,000, which is a lot of money. So I don't want to say that, that's not a lot of money. It is a lot of money. But it works out to about $1,000 per sister who's over the age of 70. The average of the Social Security disbursement that we get per sister is about $200. So we get a really small, you figure most people in the United States, the average in the United States is about $1,200. Right. Ours is about $200. So to get an extra $1,000 per person, not per month, just this one kind of lump sum per person, really does help us. And often it does help with specific things like wheelchairs, walkers. Some sisters, we have a large mother house. It's a long walk from the sister's bedroom to the dining room. Sometimes they need a scooter that you wouldn't have in a home, but if it's 500 feet to the kitchen, you might need it.
Obviously there are still needs that are there, and I think that's why the church has continued this wonderful appeal. What are some of the needs that will continue down the road where this appeal will continue to be necessary?
Sure. The bishops just at their last November meeting, November of 2016, did approve this collection for another 10 years. So we'll see it for the next decade. What the people who do this retirement office think is that by the end of that 10-year, the worst of the problem should be over. And so in this next 10 years, we do think that not only us, but all the communities will be in a better place in terms of having met the retirement needs Sometimes it's day-to-day things, the day-to-day healthcare things that everybody needs, whether it's a wheelchair or special kind of shoes or other, even a cane is pretty simple as a cane. Those kinds of things. Sometimes it's more specialized. If a sister has had a stroke, she might need a special wheelchair, one that you can't just get by walking into the local medical store. So all of those kinds of things have been extremely helpful. And I must say, the people of the Diocese of Youngstown over these last 30 years have been very generous. It's so edifying to see the care and the concern of the people throughout the diocese for the religious that they've known in their lives, and that's true across the diocese, from Ashtabula County to Columbiana, from the Pennsylvania border over to Stark and Portage County. We're so grateful, and I know we pray daily for all of our benefactors.
The collection is probably going on in many parishes as we speak this weekend,
right,
or may have gone on the weekend before or the coming weekend. How can people give if they don't particularly give in their parish?
Sure. The first place is their own parish. But if you've missed that envelope or, you missed that collection, you were out of town or whatever, send the donation to the diocese. The diocese does have a coordinator of this particular collection. So if you sent it to the diocese, they would make sure that it got accounted for. A third option, although, we do like to take care of it within the diocese, it gets sent to the national office, but we start here. But a third option is to send it directly to the national office. That office is a division of the Bishops' Conference, and they are located in Washington, D.C. Of course, our own diocesan website is doy.org, but the bishop's website is usccb.org.
Sister Mary McCormick, as always, it's a pleasure to have you on Wineskins and here at CTNY. And please know of our prayer, not only for you, but for the religious of our church that have dedicated their lives to the glory of God and also to the building up of His kingdom.
Thank you.
For Wineskins, I'm Father Jim Korda. Saint Cecilia was a virgin and martyr. To tell us more is Pam Pasquale. She is from St. Charles Church in Boardman.
In the year 545, Pope Vigilus celebrated the feast of the Basilica of St. Cecilia in Rome, Italy. The Sacramentary of Verona states that Cecilia converted her husband and his brother to Christianity. She preserved her virginity, even though married, and she was martyred for the faith. Her cult has been localized in two distinct places: in the catacomb of St. Callistus, where there is a picture of the saint dating from the 7th century, and the basilica in Trastevere, which is mentioned in the documents dating from the 5th century. The lack of information about St. Cecilia from the 4th to the 6th century, except for the graffiti on the walls of the catacomb, makes it difficult to explain her sudden popularity in the 6th century. She has been venerated as the patron of sacred music since the 15th century. The Basilica of St. Cecilia in Trastevere was constructed by Pope Pascal I. It contains a mosaic that shows St. Cecilia standing between her husband and his brother, both of whom were martyred. There is a question concerning her relics, which were found by Pope Pascal I, but not in the catacomb of St. Callistus, and he transferred the supposed relics to the Church of St. Cecilia in Trastevere. The opening prayer of the Mass is very general, without any reference to anything characteristic of St. Cecilia. The Italian version, however, makes explicit reference to her as patron of sacred music and song. It asks that we may also be worthy to sing the praises of the Lord. The same reference to music is found in the Office of Readings, taken from a discourse by St. Augustine. Words cannot express the things that are sung by the heart. As if so happy that words can no longer express what they feel, people discard the restricting syllables. They burst out into a simple sound of joy, of jubilation. The relevance of this feast can be found in the antiphons for the Canticle of Zechariah and the Canticle of Mary, in which we are urged to cast off the works of darkness and put on the armor of light, and never to cease praying and speaking to God. In our secularized society, We need to hear this call to conversion and be more faithful in our practice of prayer. The opening prayer states, "Lord of mercy, be close to those who call upon you. With Saint Cecilia to help us, hear and answer our prayers. Through Christ our Lord. Amen." For Wineskins, I'm Pam Pasquale.
We're talking with Kitty Sherer and Jim Knight on human trafficking. Before we took a break, we were talking primarily about the victims. Let's talk about the flip side, the perpetrators. And in between one of the tapings, you had mentioned that sometimes the perpetrators used to be a victim themselves, which is really kind of an eye-opener for me, and I would imagine for many people. But let's talk about the perpetrators and what leads them to something like this.
Well, specifically, I think especially when you're talking about sex trafficking, if the children are pulled in, we said the average age was between 12 and 14 that they are pulled into sex trafficking. It's a very young, impressionable age. It's an age then that it kind of destroys the rest of their life. One statistic we throw out is that the average age of a sex trafficked child is 7 years. So by the time they hit 20, they're usually dead, either from drugs or abuse. So what happens then, they try to do anything to better their lot. So to get on the other side of it, they'll start recruiting other people. So, which is very sad. You'd think that they would have sympathy and think they don't want anybody to be involved in this themselves. But the flip side is true. They're willing to do anything to better their lot in life, and they don't see any other options. So,
well, I think it would almost be natural in a sad way that that's the only thing they know.
It just really comes from if that's what they were raised with, that's what they know, and that's what they're going to be gravitating towards. And some may also be, we've seen probably some cases in the past where a parent may be trafficking their own child because they could be dealing with a heroin or opiate addiction. And so we see that linkage a lot in these cases as well. Or the trafficker may get their victim addicted to heroin or opiates or another drug as well.
Let's talk about the big issue, what can we do about it? Because, sometimes we feel so inept at dealing with some of these major issues that really affect a lot of people. So what would be some of the bottom lines that the folks that are with us or that we can do as a community?
well, it is a huge problem, and sometimes people are just, it's so staggering that they think, well, what can I really do to make a difference? One of the biggest things that we say is to be aware, to be informed, to pay attention to your surroundings. We all shop at stores, we all go to restaurants, women especially frequent nail salons and hair salons. Unfortunately, those are areas that are a big source of trafficked victims. And get on mailing lists. We have, our organization. We're happy to have any kind of interest in volunteers, and we will send out information. If they go onto the web, Polaris has a wonderful resource as far as leading you to statistics if you want that, or our organizations within a certain locale. Also, as consumers, as people, not just as Catholics or Christians, but we are morally obligated to watch out for our fellow man and not be greedy. So when you're talking about, making money by buying the cheapest clothing we can find, or, good deals on food, we have to look back to see where does that food come from? Or is it a 4-year-old child on the coast of Africa fishing in hazardous conditions? Is it somebody in a slave labor industry in the East, making clothing? We have an obligation to research this to some degree, and then also look for fair trade, stamps, and you can see that on coffee is very popular, chocolate. The bottom line is, though, those products are usually more expensive because they're paying a fair wage to somebody, and that makes it cost more. So I think, though, we are obligated to each other to pay a little bit more, so somebody else, we're not, exploiting other people either by what we do or turn our back to.
In the area of law enforcement, let's say someone notices something. Should they contact a policeman or police person? What should they do?
I would say just a couple of brief things in advance. If anybody's want to know ahead of time, what I would advise them to do, even before they may see a sign of human trafficking, contact their police department and ask if there's a particular detective that oversees that area of human trafficking. So if they do come across something they suspect could be related to human trafficking and needs police attention, they can call and ask to speak to that detective directly. If there's a situation where they're not sure it could be human trafficking related, especially if they are out of their town, it could be somewhere else on the road or in another town, they can call the National Human Trafficking Hotline number at 1-888-373-7888. That's for the Polaris, and that will feed into law enforcement agencies to be checked out.
Or should people be unafraid to do that? Do you know what I mean?
Sure. I mean, you can do it anonymously.
Okay.
The only thing they want on the hotline is they would like you to be as specific as possible.
Sure.
So unfortunately, Ohio is a big crossroads state. We have a great interstate highway system, but you can get across the state. You can get to a lot of major cities in the United States within one day. Our proximity to Canada, a lot of people can come in through Canada, across Lake Erie even. What they would like you to do is be specific. We have more truck stops in Ohio than any other state in the country. So if you're at a truck stop and you see something going on, you call the hotline. And when being specific, you could say, you can give license plate numbers. You can say, I see a van with 10, 12-year-old girls, and they seem to be wandering around in this truck stop. The more specific you can get, then they can follow up on it.
Yeah,
but they don't really want your personal name or anything.
Right. As with any information, it's in any kind of case, they want the specific details that you can give them, license plate, and even what kind of vehicle it is.
It's interesting because, sometimes we may think, well, maybe it's not what I thought it was, or maybe it's not what I think it is, so I'm not going to say anything. But, even that instinct there might help save a life.
Exactly. And that's what we always say, it's better to speak up, and there are no repercussions. If it was something totally innocent and they follow up on it and there's nothing there, it's not like they care. You're better off to speak up if you suspect something than to not say anything and turn a blind eye to it.
Sure. Well, Jim Knight, Kitty Sherer, thank you so much for being with us, just heightening the awareness of this tremendous issue that really has been plaguing us for so long, and for whatever reason continues to do so. And for the folks that are with us, we would like them to be concerned about that. And if they see something or hear something, please go to their law enforcement agency to make a claim, to let them know that this is happening, because in turn they may save an individual or more people that really are victims of this terrible, terrible issue. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you. For more pertinent information and to listen to Wineskins, visit www.doi.org, the website of the Catholic Diocese of Youngstown. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
By the time we can walk, each of us yearns for the joy that comes from being able to do for ourselves. Church World Service believes that being self-reliant is a joy everyone should share. So around the block or around the world, share the joy. Church World Service. 33 million Americans have descended into poverty. And as their futures fall, so does our nation's.
Our song today is from the CD called Fight the Fight. It is by Chris Muglia.
Sometimes I feel like I'm another fool who's lost his mind, living in an evil world where truth is hard to find. But somehow I find that my faith is near to me, and I've got to be strong, so strong, because it's my faith that God's love for me is strong, and it's my hope that keeps me going when I'm tired and days are long. Don't be thinking that you can rob me of the three, because my God is watching. He is watching over me. As I read the morning paper, I'm reminded of our times. Fear has overcome me, and confusion fills my mind. Still I stand for Jesus, though so many pull me down. Still I will stand my ground, because it's my faith that reassures me that God's love for me is strong, and it's my hope that keeps me going when I'm tired and days are long. Don't be thinking that you can rob me of free, because my God is watching. Yes, my God is watching. Yes, my God is watching. He is watching over me. Don't be thinking that you can rob me of the three, because my God is watching. Yes, my God is watching. Yes, my God is watching. He is watching over me. He's watching in the morning. He's watching in the noontime. He's watching in the evening. Watching over me. Ain't nothing that can bring me down. Jesus is watching every day of my life. Watching over me. Watching over me. So you can't take my faith. You can't take my hope, my love. Jesus is watching. Always watching over me.
As we celebrate this 33rd Sunday in Ordinary Time, we will hear more about the sacred scriptures by Father Larry Frient. He is pastor of St. Paul the Apostle Church in New Middletown and canonical pastor of Holy Rosary Church in Lowville.
So often we are given something in life, and every bit as often we have to decide what to do with what we have been given. In today's gospel, we hear the story of 3 servants. What were they given by their master? Well, 2 of the 3 wisely used what they were given. They doubled the money that was given to them, the treasure, but one decided not to. He buried the funds entrusted to him. He was afraid to use what was given him, and it seems kind of sad because he didn't seem to know why he was afraid. Perhaps he was afraid to take any risk, and yet the master was not pleased with his way of going about. If all of us pause and think about it, we'll find that it's true. Each of us has been entrusted with a lot. It may not seem so, and sometimes certainly others are entrusted with more, but each of us has received a great deal. In a sense, the Lord wants us to settle accounts. How have we used what we have been given? The Lord takes us to the window of life in a sense. And what do we see? Oftentimes we see many people in need, not just far away, but often right there in front of us. We find people who need not just money or material support, and perhaps we have very little of that to give, and perhaps we need more of that ourselves. But what do we see? We see those who need a word of support during struggling times. Or perhaps they need a message of hope during a time that's void of hope in their lives, or maybe just during these pre-winter blahs. Perhaps they need an ear to listen to them in a world that's filled with so many talkers and not nearly enough listeners. So often, we tend to center in on ourselves. We make an excuse for every need. The one who needs the pat on the back is ignored because we say to ourselves, heck, I'm struggling too. The one who needs hope is not paid attention to because we say, heck, times are tough for everyone. The one who needs to be heard is talked at instead. Hey, you should hear my story. Maybe the truth is this. We're often afraid to be the light in the darkness. It's sad because often we are the only ones who can give someone the support, the hope, the love, and patience that they need. Maybe all too often, we are the ones who are afraid to take the risks, forgetting that the Lord risked and gave his very life. We forget that blessings that we give have a way of returning to us in ways that we never dreamed. This week, we celebrate Thanksgiving in a special way. Remember, to give thanks means much more than just standing by the mirror and uttering thanks, God, because the Lord expects more, because we have been given so much more. To really give thanks means to recognize the people that God shows us through the window of life and to use what he gives us, however humble, to meet their needs. So, happy Thanksgiving, and may God bless our giving. For Wineskins, this is Father Larry Frient.
The riches of the kingdom are to be invested in life and in the world for the benefit of the entire people of God, especially the poor and the vulnerable. We are not to keep these riches for ourselves. Are you a good steward of God's riches? How are you investing the gospel so as to make a good return to the Lord on the last day? Wineskins is a production of CTNY, the Catholic Telecommunications Network of Youngstown. It is brought to you by the Annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts. I'm your host, Father Jim Korda, wishing you a beautiful holiday week and a blessed Thanksgiving Day.